Welcome to the Pantheon Plus Rewind.
What's up, and welcome to episode 42 of The Rewind. Good news, we are officially 1 week closer to playing Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, the upcoming MMORPG by Visionary Realms. And The Rewind is here to put the U back in community and keep the fires stoked for a game that we think is the next big step forward in the MMO genre. But first, somebody grab a torch or summon your fire elemental because my stealthy co-host needs to be revealed before we get going. What's up, Minus? How you doing, man?
Hey, man. Very good. Doing good. Yeah. So now we're already using fire. See, this is going to be trouble for me when we get into Pantheon and the fire can break stealth, huh?
Yeah, you got a real problem. You got fire issues.
Like no one's allowed to use fire swords. Like I guess I'll never have a fire dagger. I don't know how that's going to work. It's interesting, right?
Yeah, what if that happens?
No, man, not a whole lot going on. I've been listening to a lot of music lately. I just get into these vibes where I just listen to music and I sit around and, you know, I'll have a few drinks or play a board game or something with a friend and I'll just listen to music and I just get so into it. Like once I put music on, I can just do that for hours. And my favorite thing in the world to do is open up Spotify, be like, oh, I remember this song and put it on. And then you go to the like people that listen to this artist also listen to this. And you just keep going down that rabbit hole, so to speak. Right. Yeah. It's awesome. So now just listening to a lot of music, jumping on EQ2 here and there in between our play sessions to get ready for our next one. And we just had that really cool moment with on Twitter. I don't know if you saw that where we as a community all came together and I think it's MMO Games now put an article out for Pantheon. So that was a lot of fun. Big shout out.
That was crazy. I was going to bring that up too. Yeah. Big
shout out to, Basgrim for getting that kicked off. And then, the community came together and Nathan brought his community. We brought ours. Basgrim kept that going and even Pantheon jumped in. So really cool to see where it started. There was a poll for Pantheon. We weren't even in it. Pantheon was not even in the poll for upcoming MMORPGs. The community speaks up. Then it becomes a poll of Ashes versus, Pantheon. Those two the two developers are very close to each other. So it was kind of a fun thing. But now, MMO Games is committed to covering more Pantheon. They're going to put more articles out. They've already wanted to reach out to some of the content creators to have some discussions with them. So it's really cool to see like what the community did to kind of drive this media a little further forward. And again, it's not just the creators, it's you guys like all coming to the call and voting for Pantheon and throwing your comments in. So it's a really neat moment this week that really shows why community is such a big deal.
It was funny. It's like this has happened before with these polls where we sort of rally the troops, right? And they all sort of come running and everybody puts in their vote, right? And because there's such a loyal community behind this game and the back and forth and the MMOgames.com saw it sort of happening in real time and they're like, oh, really? Okay, well, let's do a bigger thing then. And they sort of made it into a bigger thing. Very cool.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Right on, man. And I want to mention too, it's before we get to the show here, I have to becoming a weekly tradition, but I have to give shout outs for our listeners. Again, we had Bounty Code, Sparrow, Bobo, throw some donations in for the premiere last week. And again, as always, thank you so much. You guys are awesome. And, if you're listening to this via download only and you're missing out on the hangouts that we have Sunday morning where we just, during the premiere, we sit around, we talk, we get all caffeinated up and talk some nonsense and have fun listening to this show. So if you can make it for a premiere, man, I really, at least try to make it once because, Ferris Bueller had a good quote one time. He said, if you have the means, I highly recommend it. It is so choice. So come hang out on Sunday if you can. But thanks again to those folks that I mentioned. And that's it. So Minus, you ready to get a rewind on here?
Oh, you know it, man. Let's do it.
This week in Visionary Realms news and notes.
All right, so we always start with the VR news and social media recap, their Twitter, the forum updates, that direct VR communication. And we have a few things to discuss this week. We're going to start with VR's monthly developers stream, which featured Nefel and crafting. We're not going to go super into depth on this. We could do a whole show on this, and we kind of already did right there on Pantheon Plus U. So you guys can go back if you want to hear our thoughts and check it out on Pantheon Plus U episode 52. That'll be on YouTube, obviously, by the time you're listening to this. And more so, if you want to hear directly from Nefel, jump over to the actual Pantheon feed on Visionary Realms YouTube page, and then you can hear it right from his mouth if you don't want to hear our opinion. So I just want to cover a couple quick things, and then we'll get right to Twitter. Now, there were patch notes, and we read through these on Pantheon Plus U, but I'm going to read through them again because there's some pretty good stuff here, and I'm going to do it quick. But there's a new projectile system that was put in for players and NPCs. There's a new hover animation suite, which was shown in the artifact from the co-stream. And it was interesting because that's the first artifact we saw, and it actually gave like protection from curse, spell reflect, gave some slow falls. So that artifact did quite a few things other than just making you hover and look really awesome. The pursuit code for AI was upgraded. That's something they've been working on a lot with NPC pathing, stuff like that. How does the NPC follow you and hunt you down to your death? The audio trigger system is updated. That was like we saw in the old stream with the Faded Memories song that kicked up or score, I guess you'd say. Yeah.
That awesome moment when he looked through the hole in the wall in the cave there.
Yeah, really cool. They talked about dispositions. Pyrophobic was, the first really disposition put in after the refactoring, and it's fully functioning. They'll be tweaking it here and there, but it was on display in the stream. Improvements to the camera for zooming and first person. There's a lot of people in the Pantheon community that want to play in first person. Not really something I'm into, but it's cool that option will be there for them.
Kind of funny when we've been playing EverQuest 2. I actually just experimented around with that because I always thought I'd like to go back to it, but I don't know, man. I
can't be that unaware of my surroundings, I guess is the way to put it. Like being in first person. Yeah. Tooltip system. I know this isn't the most exciting thing, but they put a dynamic tooltip system in finally. So when you highlight over abilities, it's going to change, what the ability does depending on your stats, which is really cool. And I love that. As a numbers guy, I'm big into that. And that actually is going to tie into something else we're going to talk about today, but really cool to see that. You get a buff, you get a debuff, you put on different armor. You can actually see with hovering over your abilities how they change. And I just think that's phenomenal personally.
Yeah, it's me too.
Huge. The buffs and debuffs, how they're shown on the NPC is cleaned up. Defense now depends on positioning as a rogue. Very important to me. I was backstabbing and getting parried every once in a while. It's like, hey. So, there's no more. Yeah. Unless you're a monk, because we did get that little bean that monks apparently can block from behind. That's a pretty neat little thing. And, as we talked about last time there, monks are next on the list, I think.
Yeah.
So we should see a monk hopefully soon. Then obviously they put the base harvesting and crafting system in. So when you guys go back and check out that content, know that this is step one of many steps to getting the crafting system up. And what I'm about to say here is going to be short and sweet. There's a lot more to it. But essentially, crafting will feature 6 different professions in which you'll be able to pick one. But then even in picking that one, you're going to decide how you want to specialize within that profession, which I like a lot. It means that, multiple blacksmiths can be different from each other and still support each other.
Right.
Right. So you're going to be able to gain base levels in all the harvesting jobs, which is interesting. So you'll be able to harvest at a low level, it looks like, in all of the harvesting jobs. But at the same time, you'll need to pick 2 to specialize in. So again, sort of that, you can pick some easy plants. You can hit a rock to get some ore. But if you want to be specialized, you're going to have to pick 2. And I like that. I'm okay with that. There's a lot of people who I think want to be able to have all professions and all harvesting, but I think it brings more identity when you have to make choice. What do you think on that?
Yeah, choices are interesting. We've mentioned this with regard to classes. If you have everything available, the choices become irrelevant and everybody can just do everything. So I think it's the right move. I think it's sort of the obvious move, but still good to hear it.
Yeah. Some of the people that will fight back against that say that, now just have a bunch of alts. Great. That means you're going to play more.
Yeah.
It's no problem.
Well, I said this on the show last night on Pantheon Plus U last night. I said, or Thursday night, that, I lost my train of thought. What was I going to say? I got lost in my own time syncing up. But, that inefficiency is games have made everything so efficient, and that's a problem. There has to be an efficiency for the in a game like in MMOs, especially because that's what causes other people to be involved, right? If you can do everything very efficiently, you don't need anybody else, and that's a point I made on the show the other night.
Yeah. Now there's a ton of talk about the general gist of everything, but breaking it down, they really want adventuring and crafting experiences to matter equally. And to be, they use the word symbiotic relationship between them. So crafting was going to contain molds and patterns that you'll be able to decide which types of materials you want to put into. And I think it's going to make crafting more customizable to make specific needs for gear, which is kind of cool. Like when you're designing for a rogue who wants to, be strength heavy or dexterity heavy or agility heavy, however you want to do it. you're really going to be able to make decisions based on how you build these things through the, the patterns, the molds, or whatever you use, which is kind of neat. It's different. It's a little different than what works.
Yeah, that point was really interesting when Nefel said that, because he kind of he was very acknowledging that you don't want to lean into that too heavily, right? Because then you get these only warriors are going to be blacksmiths, right? Ones that use strength as their primary combat stat. If there's too much linkage between that and the crafting profession, so you have to be very. He said that, I think the way he phrased it was, we want to do it in a very sort of a little bit of a vague way, so it's not all powerful, not all encompassing.
Yeah, exactly. I think that this is just going to help push crafting in a different direction than, we typically see in MMORPGs, which is simply talk to somebody, learn whatever skills you can at the level, make 100 of that item, move to the next one, etc. So I think it's going to add a little more flavor to it. And that flavor and the specialization hopefully means that, you'll see some unique items that not everybody's going to be able to make, which is kind of neat. So,
very cool.
Yeah, again, check out episode 52 of the Pantheon Plus U if you want to hear more in-depth discussion with us in the community. Or again, jump right over to Visionary Realms and check with their direct link to their show, their dev stream, I guess you say, where you can just hear it straight from Nefel himself. So,
and I think Nefel was actually going to post some stuff on the forums too. He was talking on Discord today about other further questions. He loves the forums, right? He's always been a forum king. So if you want further questions that didn't get answered on the stream, chances are they're probably on the forums. Go check it out at pantheonmmo.com.
Yeah, for sure. So the next thing we're going to do is going to jump into the Twitter posts from VR this week from Gilson. And there's some good debates. The first one was, how much stat details do you want to see? And it's interesting because we just talked about the, hovering over your abilities and seeing that real-time change. And I think that's pretty awesome. So lots of different answers here and different feels for it. So we're going to start with our buddy Furious Pierre, who says, please simplify stats, period. Base it on percent, /+2% to hit, +3% critical, etc. Trying to figure out the code to see +100 ZXY means is probably the most annoying thing about MMOs. Also, when old equipment gets outdated, offer a way to bump them up. So a little interesting thing there. Maybe do some crafting to help bump those old items up.
Yeah.
Deuterino says, with knowledge comes freedom of choice. Give me all the numbers.
No, not all the numbers. Some numbers, not all the numbers. Yeah,
I like it. Disposalist says, I'm torn. On one hand, I want the mystery and an unfolding world, not something detailed to the nth degree. On the other hand, there's nothing worse than getting to high level to find your character not how you'd like because you didn't understand the implications of your choice. So good point there, I think.
Yeah. I might disagree a little bit just with regard to when you get to the end and your character's not exactly how you can't design it from the end to the beginning. You can never do that. I mean, some people want to do that, but I don't think that's good game design, but that's just maybe me.
Yeah. Jorgen Wickstrom says simple and advanced stats toggle so that you can see if you're interested and you can dig in. Toggles. Everybody just wants everything to be toggled. People will figure out formulas and share it anyways. If you're upfront about it, we can help track down odd bugs. It also helps people plan their gear, even when you're not a min-maxer. I think that's a huge point. I think a lot of times that people planning their gear or being like, oh, I want to get to this crit level because that's going to make this ability work better. That's not necessarily being a min-maxer. It's just experimenting sometimes. Just because people use numbers to get better or go after goals, it doesn't always make them a min-maxer. So
that's what I was going to say. What you just said about goals, it's fine. Having goals is good. I want my character. I have a goal for my character. And if I don't hit the target precisely, that's okay too. I mean, the thing is that, I know MMO characters, you spend a lot of hours developing them. It's not like a single player game where you can sort of give it a few shots, have a few different saves going on. Like this is your one thing. I understand that aspect of it, but it's like, if you have so much information that you can precisely aim it to the micro, to the very nth degree, like Disposalist said, I don't know about that.
All right. Well, the next one here was Elkman. He said all. You'll see all the numbers. Is impossible to make meaningful decisions if you do not know what you are doing. What do you think of that?
Well, it clearly disagrees with what I'm saying. It's pretty much the exact opposite of what I'm saying, but yeah.
Serafina says, I'll just say this. This is a good one. If you don't give enough detail, the top players will test everything, math it out, and have spreadsheets for min-maxing. So one group having data and another not having that data will create a gap in the player divide derived from knowledge, in addition to whatever skill gaps. I am a huge believer in this. If it's going to be possible for the top 10% to figure these things out, all you're doing is giving them more power than the people below them.
That is no way. That, like, you can do it. Anybody can figure it out. I mean,
but they won't.
Well, they can.
They won't.
I don't know, man. But okay, if you won't, then you give up your right to complain about it. You know, like if you're not willing to do the work, you give up your right to sort of complain about it. You know, I don't know. I don't think all players are that capable of that in-depth dig that isn't fun. Let's be honest, that a top 10% would have to do if they're not given all the information. I've always been the point that Seraphita makes there, I have found myself making quite often. It's very similar to like our political atmosphere with all this Reddit stuff that just happened, right? With like investors. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a lot of us that don't have the ability to have the money to invest to make our money bigger and bigger and bigger. But the people with tons of money, they just play around and they're just, you know, making more and more and more and more money. It's like, to make money, you have to have all this money. So if you don't have money, you're screwed, right? And that's kind of like what I think when I look at like accessibility to information. If it's not accessible to the bottom, 60, 70%, but it's accessible to the top 30, I think that just creates like this almost like class-like system, like from the olden days, like that you have the people that have access versus the people that don't. And I think that creates a gap, in my opinion. I don't know. Maybe. I hear what you're saying, but I think you're arguing. I think what you're arguing is exactly the opposite of like what happened. Like Reddit showed that they have power. They didn't know they had it because because they thought they didn't have that power because they didn't have access, but they realized, no, we do actually have this power and we did something about it. Right now, it's not going to last. Yes, they're going to change.
They just took a huge bath too. They just got woke.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but initially there was some success, and they just sort of showed that you don't like, just because you don't necessarily aren't in a position of power, you aren't powerful. You know what I mean? I don't know. I think long term, maybe that might be proven distrue, but in the short term, it's kind of like think about like everybody who has high speed internet and everyone who doesn't. That is a huge advantage to everybody who has high speed internet, right? Yeah, but that's not an effort matter. That's not like if they just put in the work, they'd have high speed internet. You know, it's like sometimes it's like an access to a resource. I don't know that it's all effort. I mean, that bottom tier of people that don't have the capability to go into Excel and understand how to use Excel in the way that they're doing it to crunch numbers, and they don't know how to run a parser and pull this data from it. Like, I don't think it's that simple. I think you might be oversimplifying how that's fair. How one in that top 20, 30% get that data and then all the flaws that's with that data, right? So like they do the data at their crunch and how they want to do it, and they come up with results. Then it's gospel because nobody can figure it out any different, right? Like the errors that are there, movement, things you can't calculate, how you're supposed to move in a boss fight. None of that stuff can be calculated for the most part. So you're just, you're believing the people who at least say, no, here's all my data, right? Like that's how it always works. So I think the more accessible it is, the more that you can create clarity. And then if the game is built in a way that has choice and you do different things, then those numbers are going to empower the people that normally wouldn't have a voice to say, no, you can play this way too. So I don't know. It's interesting. Interesting. Yeah, it is. It's a very interesting discussion. We probably go into that quite a bit. But let's move forward. James Martini says none. So this is your guy. He says, expose no raw numerical data whatsoever. And then he continues, he says, one of the concerns was, what if I put points into something, but I'm already at cap? The way you address this is not by implementing hard caps, but rather using something like a logarithmic. I can't say it. Logarithmic? Logarithmic. Yeah. Progression. I know the word. I can say it in my head. I can't get it out of words. Progression for internal stats. You never hit a cap, but you get diminishing returns on investment. So as a RPG, MMORPG player, there's really no difference between hard caps and diminishing return to the point where it's useless. That's the same thing. So, yeah, interesting. I don't know. I mean, I think if there are diminishing returns, I mean, that's one of those things that you'd have to figure out, right? Like you wouldn't know it necessarily if there's no hard cap. You just have to see like eventually. But most of the time you play, if you don't have those numbers, you're not going to see that.
Yeah, but most of the time you play in soft caps, not as much hard caps. Like there were hard caps back in the day where like, well, I have to get to this hit percent and I'll never miss. That was needed, right? But most of the time you play in soft caps. So diminishing returns is no different than just having soft caps, in my opinion. So
it's so funny. I come from like, I'm so old that it's like the hard caps were always like 255 because it couldn't go to 256 because of whatever the bits or, you know, or 512 was always the limit because, you know, things always function in those sort of,
that's fantastic.
Number sort of ranges.
Yeah. The next one here is from Decaying Skeleton. He says, detail in written language, no formulas. This drives player interaction and discussion, and most importantly to me, discovery. Knowing class stats is enough for me, but don't mislead me. For example, to pump in into agility, thinking I'll dodge noticeably higher number of attacks. For those who want details, they can enjoy figuring it out and sharing amongst the community. Inevitably, the knowledge will spread. I feel the formulas are a shortcut to omitting viable gear that took development time and effort, by the way, leaving players to seek only the, quote, best. Side note, I liked how gear in Final Fantasy XI had small gradual stat increases, each point mattered, and having some low-level gear viable at high level. I was not a fan of gear swapping, though, so the challenge against others to obtain those pieces. So he says, looking at you, Leaping Lizzie. So a lot of good points there, I thought that he made.
Yeah,
so,
it's a well thought out 3 tweet.
Yeah, 3 tweet. I like that. You might have just coined a phrase there, a 3 tweet.
All right. Hashtag 3 tweet.
Hashtag 3 tweet. You can't go to 4. 1, 2, 3. What happens? It's like Monty Python, right? If you go past 3, you've gone too far.
Nice.
Keith Hill says, I agree with the poster that people will figure it out anyway. Might as well tell us. His example from tabletop RPGs makes a great point. You could also add that a UI toggle for minimal stat details so that people that don't want to see all the extra numbers in math. Toggles, toggles, toggles. And finally, Benjamin Brooks says, I like EQ and how they did each stat. They tell you the percentage it gives you and the cap. As a healer, I want to know my bonus healing. If it caps at 100% and I have 120, I can lose some of that to put into another stat. Keep it simple. Too much can ruin the experience. Now that I'll agree with. I think that's a good point. Like, don't make it so you don't realize that you have more than it works. I think that's important. So
yeah, that's basically like, I'm not 100% no information like James Martini was saying. Like, I'm really not there. I like the discovery process. I think the discovery process is what makes this fun. You know, when it's all just given to you, that I have a problem with. But what he's saying, what Benjamin Brooks is saying here is like, yeah, like give us some, but I don't need to know every single underlying formula. I don't need to know, and I don't think the players need to know the spreadsheets. They don't need to see the spreadsheets. Just make it, there has to be something to discover. That's where I land.
Yeah. I love numbers. You know, one of my favorite things to do in WoW openly was running SimCraft. You know, you throw a bunch of gear on, you pull a profile out of your character, you have it simulate 1,000,000 times, you look at the simulations, you change and tweak some things, throw a different piece of gear on, what looks different, why, you know, then you have to figure out, okay, well, this is a standing still fight. So obviously, you know, if I do this versus this setup, there's a slight difference, but then when I'm moving, this is going to be better. I mean, there were days in WoW where I was logged into the game chatting with people, but I literally stood in one place changing gear and running SimCrafts, and I loved the hell out of it. And I know that there's so many people, including a huge percentage of WoW fans, that hated it because they said, you know, why is the gear so complicated? And why is understanding how to be stronger so complicated that I have to run this external program that does 1,000,000 computations of my gear? Like, why don't I just know what's better? And I can agree with that a lot too.
Think of it like this. I just had this sort of idea pop into my head, but like, think of it like science, right? Some people really like to do science. Some people couldn't do science if their life depended on it, right? They would run away.
Do science.
But think about this, like the universe doesn't reveal itself to us. Just, we don't have the numbers, you know, that physics, the laws of physics abides by. We have those numbers through scientific experimentation, through scientific discovery, but they weren't just there, right? Like we didn't need them to be given to us. We needed to discover them. And once we have them, yes, they're very useful and they're very helpful. So like what you're saying, standing there in WoW doing simulations all day, like you're doing science, like, and I get the enjoyment of that. I totally get it. But I think that's the discovery process, right? You can't just have it handed to you. Then it's like, it just takes away the magic of it.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's a great, I mean, I could talk forever about that. You know how into that type of stuff I am. So I'll leave it at that. We both, we're a little different on that one for sure. But Yeah, I get it. I mean, right, like somebody discovered the internet. If we sat down as smart as we think we are and had to describe how the internet works, we probably wouldn't do it nearly well, right? But we can use it and be happy it's here. So
yes, I will. That's right. I will use my scientific analysis on the internet to continue to use it.
So the next one here, final topic from VR is limiting coin. What are your thoughts on forced coin limits? This is a weird question to me. Nathan Napalm said, although there is bound to be some sort of limit to the coin, as eventually there has to be a number of digits the game can no longer account for. It always bums me out to hear what that limit is. Limitations just bum me out in general for some reason. Nima Faye said, the only way I can see it working is if currency is placed in inventory slots like Diablo 1. So it would naturally be limiting by its inventory size. But since it probably has its own currency tab, it just seems like a needless reaction. It was interesting bringing up the old Diablo 1 inventory slot. Basgrim was actually in on this. He says an artificial limit feels lazy to me. I'd almost rather coin have weight if needed, but even still, that's not my idea of fun. I think you're better off putting more thought into how much money NPCs give and offsetting that money with money sinks to keep inflation in check. Walking Waste says, I can see coin weight limit limit being a good way to get people to reset their camps. If you've seen a camping spot for hours and you have to go back to town or a bank to dump your goods in coin, allowing other players a chance to camp. It's a pretty slippery slope, though. He had to throw that in, didn't he? The old slippery slope. No, I'm kidding. Walking Waste. That's just a trigger word for me. If you're going to force weight limits or coin limits, you should have a good system for managing inventory space and a good reason for doing something like this. There could be a lot of people upset that they have to reset just because there's an artificial limit on coin. Yeah. Mark S. Moore said, I would be in favor of this, but I admire part of what is my bias of always being the outlaw outside of the hyper rich. Yeah, truth there, Mark. I also understand that digital wealth and commerce are gameplay akin to any other system for many. The impact on gold farmers shouldn't be dismissed either, though. That's interesting. Like if money weighs so much, yeah, it's going to hurt gold. Manuel Garcia said, interesting topic. I don't think there should be a limit. It will depend on a lot of factors: drop amount from mobs, hidden treasures, sell versus buy prices. There will always be a lot of different players. Me, for instance, I suck at making money. Yep. High five, Manuel. High five. Gaming Fanatic says, I think that is a hard question to answer. You want players to be able to make as much money as they can, but at the same time, gold farmers can infest the game. So 2 more here before we jump into some topic here. So Uso Gaming says, having a weight limit and gear that will help assist encumbrance usually works well in the games I've played. This way you can have heavy lifting gear to increase encumbrance, but stat-wise for other things, just make it undesirable for other content. So it's interesting to have like travel gear. I kind of like that a little bit. And finally,
like this is with big pockets or something.
yeah. Minus 10 strength, but you got really big pockets in these pants. Yeah. So this was a really interesting one, and I like this, and it's an old idea, which is kind of crazy. Sylvia DeBarber says, Ultima had a great idea. Coin weighs a lot, but if you go to the bank, you can turn them into a check and pretty much weighs nothing. So just throwing some ideas out there. That's really interesting. Turning coin into notes is be a really interesting system, actually. I'm kind of can get behind that.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if other games have done that. I can't think of any, but yeah.
No, I mean, geez, if I don't have to carry around all that copper to haste and boot strutter, I'd be pretty happy. So, I'm not, they've talked a lot about weight limit on coin. I'm not against it. I'm fine with it. I'm never someone who has a ton of money. So, we talked a little bit about crafting the other night and like how I'd hate to have to constantly go back and forth to put my crafting materials in. That would be frustrating. But for money, I don't know. It's that seems like a rich person problem, and I'm never going to be rich. So I guess I'm not too.
It's not a problem you have to solve.
Yeah,
I get
it's not. Yeah, it's not an issue for me. What do you think? Anything on that at all?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think of it like, what problem are you trying to solve, right? Like, what is the problem that limiting coin would be trying to solve? Is it gold farmers? Is it the economy, controlling people from becoming, robber barons of some sorts, I don't know. I don't know what problem it's solving necessarily. I I think there are probably pretty creative ways that you can address it. The coin weight thing, I wasn't a fan of it at first when we talked about it a little while ago, or when VR announced a little while ago. And I've kind of come around because I understand a little more about the why they did it, you know, in terms of like controlling, you know, items and making a gold sink, making banking, using a bank useful, having a purpose, that kind of thing. So I don't know. I'm just not sure what kind of issue limiting somebody how much gold they can have. Like, it doesn't say like on your person or in general, in total, right? Like if it's in total, like, again, what problem are you solving? Like, why can't my bank account have millions of dollars in it? Like, I'm not sure why that would be a problem. But I've learned in games, one of the things I've learned in games is that it's easy to hoard gold and it's better to spend it, because when you spend it, you are always hunting for more. I tend to like, I try to spend my money as soon as I get it, because that way I'm always like hungry for the next thing that I can have more money with, you know? So it sort of feeds my gameplay loop a little bit, but maybe that's what they're going for with this. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe with crafting, having all these like exclusive items that'll drop off enemies, maybe I can be rich by just selling all those things. We'll see.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, well, that's it for VR news and notes. A little long this week, but Derek, let's get to the next segment here.
When the Pantheon community speaks, we listen. So let's dig into the forums and fan projects to see what the discussion's all about. Okay, so this week's community discussion, we're going to look back at the developer roundtable with Chris Rowan, who is VR's chairman and CEO. So he talked to Kilson, he answered some community questions earlier this week, and there were some really interesting pieces of information here, and we're going to get right to it. And as we go through this, Minus, jump in, because there's a lot. We're not going to do like community discussion responses. I'm just going to sort of lay it all out, because I think there was lots to talk about here. First of all, he started out sort of clarifying he's not the evil corporate overlord that some people think he is. He says, I don't chew on my cigar all day. I don't got horns, you know. And
Wasn't that what an evil corporate overlord would have you believe? No, I'm kidding.
Taking a bath in dollar bills, you know, like he's not Scrooge McDuck. So we know that. He really, I didn't know anything about him, honestly. As just listening to it, I learned a lot about him. He talked about his professional background a lot, which is pretty interesting. Had a funny story about almost losing an original PlayStation prototype when he was working for Sony. Isn't that crazy? Anyway, I'm glad that turned out okay for him. He talked about coming on to the Sigil team when they were working on Vanguard and trying to get that project back on track. He shared some pretty interesting details about, you know, he came into Sigil after Microsoft got involved. He basically said, I did everything, you know, I could in the most fundamental way to get the game funded to ensure it was published, and it was a very difficult time, he talked about. So he, you know, this is a situation that he grew very close with Brad McQuaid, and it was really interesting to hear that. So lots of ups and downs in terms of what he learned, and he reiterated that, you know, it's the passion, it's the commitment, and the people that's the key to a good team. Yeah. Anyway, getting to Pantheon, one of the things he mentioned was how, you know, this team loves to talk openly about ideas for a game for Pantheon, right? They're the VR team, and sometimes that comes with perils. I thought that was really cool because, you know, he says when you talk openly, it can lead to a lot of misunderstandings. It can lead to cynicism. You know, these things they say can sort of take on a life of their own, and VR is doing something that usually occurs behind closed doors, and getting held to speculation. You know, that's when it causes them to sort of like batten down the hatches a little bit and sort of, you know, put the clamps on the information sharing a little bit, because they get sort of worried that the things are getting taken the wrong way or misunderstood. You know, he just basically affirmed that, you know, 100% he wants to share information. It's just trying to find the right balance. He gave the recent example, and I think this is important for the community to hear, because I saw this too. You know, he was talking about the idea of a progress tracker for the 2021 for meeting the road to alpha, the roadmap sort of idea. That was something that was discussed in the VIP forums. And he said this, you know, it got lost in translation basically and turned into something like, oh, okay, they have a progress tracker that's happening. He said, no, that's not something we're doing. I often
wonder, you know, we're here and let's be honest, Pantheon Plus, the plus is for positive. The positive is for, you know, being positive in the community. There's a lot to it, right? So sometimes I wonder, like with our excitement and when we talk about the little things we hear, like how many times we accidentally contributed to this? And I feel bad, right? Like when you hear that, like we're never trying to do that. We're all really excited, right? So
it's always layers of translation, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, we're not going to stop. Sorry.
Nah, that's right. Well, we've gotten this far. We're going to keep going. So
hey, listen, there's an easy way to stop us. Just give us a lot of exclusive content. Give us some dev interviews. Let's book up Pantheon Plus with a lot of insider info, and we won't have to speculate, right? So
that's right. That's a very good solution. One of the questions that Chris was asked was, how important is the evaluation build for this project? And we talked about this a couple episodes ago. But he gave some more insight. He said, they've shown it to potential partners previous to this in bits and pieces, but this is something they can hand off to them. And he said there's enough things that are completed in this build. He said he showed them, to one just that very morning of the interview that he did with Kelson, and they've had partners interested for a while, and they've actually gotten good constructive feedback. And he gave a couple examples, which I thought were really interesting. Quality of life features, things that we might not see, but they're paying attention to. One was key mapping. And he said that was one that kept coming back as, from the people they've shown this to, is like, okay, we got to do something about this. Another one was, this was interesting, light sources being persistent, like when your torch is sheathed. So like during climbing, so you lose your light source. It's like, that seems like a thing that could be made easier, Yeah. And then of course, the first sort of 30 minutes of the evaluation build, we mentioned it needs to be a little more hand-holding for the evaluators, right? Not for us fans. We don't want that. We don't want hand-holding. But for most prospective partners, that the ones that they've spoken to, that's what they're hearing, right? And that's for them to appreciate the game and to understand what's going on. And that just Chris said that he realized that they needed to show more than they were telling, and that the future is, like he described it as, they're a few weeks out from jumping into the Shark Tank. So
it's exciting.
Take that that is right. So I guess what that means is like really, really putting it out there and letting the feedback come.
Yeah, there's been some really passionate skeptics that are against the evaluation build because they tie it back to tenants and stuff. And I think it's really important that this is not like, as fans, every piece we get, we want more. So when we see something, we want to be excited and we want to just talk it to death. And it needs how does this make the game closer, right? And I think a lot of people, they understand that this isn't for them, but we really need to understand this is something that's going to help the future of the game. It's not a picture of what we're going to play. It's a picture of how they get more money and get more partners. And it's funny because like you said, like these are the things that these evaluators want, that handholding we don't want, but they need it. It has to happen so that someone who's going to put a ton of money in this game or become a publisher is willing to toss millions of dollars, and they can't have these questions. It's a lot different than us as players. Yeah. Most of the time, these publishers aren't going to be the ones running around with, max level characters being the world firsts. They're not. They're just going to be sitting back, happy that we're all playing. So
that's right. That's right. Exactly. So the real interesting stuff came in the next question. It was asked a very general question. What's on the 2021 agenda? And Chris's top item was partner business development and preparation for growth. So those are very big ideas. But he said as money comes in, they need to be able to put that money to work, which is definitely true. And he said they're driving hard towards alpha in 2021. So, that alpha word has come up now. We heard it in the producer's letter. We've now heard Chris talk about it on their forums. So, what needs to be done? He said not much to do on the programming side, which is really kind of cool. The code base is very solid. Now, here's where we get in what he did say needs to be done. And, it is a big thing. He talked about being able to switch out the network stack for scalability. He talked a lot about the homegrown, how they're homegrown, highly scalable network. And this is something that Ben Dean had mentioned on Nathan Napalm's interview with him about how they're proud of this technology that they have. But he said it's a big commitment and it's going to take all hands on deck. And they basically can't do much else while that's going on. He sort of framed it like major surgery, right? Like they do have to do this big technological piece that is going to pause their development while they do this. Mm-hmm. So being honest, I really felt like he was very honest, and there were some things that were probably like, not easy for him, or you didn't want to say, but you have to be honest with your fans and say this. So he was talking about how this technology really makes the bottlenecks not technological anymore. It's all about scaling the game design for populations and designing around population density. That's becoming the challenge rather than technology anymore. When we've heard this before, talked about how cloud computing is one of the major reasons like Pantheon has been designed with this scalability in mind from day one. And so that's not their concern. And then the last point he made was that there's quite a bit of world building still to do. And it's always the biggest challenge with MMOs. He did say Jimmy Lane, has pioneered a lot of what they're doing. He's the process that they're using to semi-automate and make things more efficient. And it's been a real big deal, and it's enabled that. And then saying, with that in mind, what resources do we need to support 8,000 alpha testers? That's a real challenge, right? So manpower, people, staff, that kind of thing. So interesting stuff there. What do you think?
Yeah, and a lot of people, on a side note here, I don't want to ignore this, a ton of people in the community went crazy about the 8,000 number because during this, Kilson says something along the lines of like, well, that was just kind of a number we threw out there. It's not a real number. And at first everyone's like, oh, 8,000, that's 8,000. So there's this big, crazy, like, well, why did you say it? If it's not a real number. I think what they're trying to say is like, there's probably projections of like where they are now. When alpha becomes available or gets announced, there's going to be a huge surge. It's expensive. Don't get me wrong, but it's not as expensive as getting into, PA testing. So it's probably just this idea of like, we could have somewhere around 8,000 people. Like that's kind of what it was.
Right.
And so like, I don't know, there's a lot of people that are up in arms about, he said a number. Now he's saying that number doesn't mean anything. What does that mean? I think it's really just a way that they kind of said like, all right, looking at everything the way we have, we can expect 8,000 plus people probably. It's probably a very safe number to think like, what investments are we going to get? Who's going to jump into alpha when it's announced? And what growth is that going to look like? It doesn't necessarily mean that's where they're at now. So. Yeah,
that's a good point. The idea is not like, the idea is there's a lot of people are going to be playing alpha, right? That's all you really need to know, right? That's what it boils down to. Interesting stuff. They have some crowdfunding initiatives coming up. Chris said they have some ideas that they want to do for further crowdfunding. They talked about Ben Dean's apparently working on some awareness marketing and some outbound. This is all like corporate speak a little bit, but outbound awareness influencer marketing in 2021. So
hey, maybe we can be part of that.
Well, it does sound like something that we would be well positioned to provide. I'm just
saying we would love to be a part of that, right? I mean, we'll put aside time. We'll cancel projects and meetings. We'll rework the calendar, but hey, we'll be there.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'm an influencer on social media. I never thought there would be any day where I would consider myself anywhere near that phrase in any sort of way, shape, or form. But who knows? But as long as it's not like, when you think of influencer, I think of like, I don't know, Instagram, flavors of the month sort of thing and all these weird things. But who knows?
Just get ready to dress sexy and talk about energy drinks. Okay.
Right. I'm trying to play it safe with what I say here. I'm like, I don't want to talk about like,
So for anyone listening to the rewind right now, here's what you have to look forward to in 2021. Derek's going to get sexy on Instagram and he's going to be pitching energy drinks you've never heard of. And we're going to be good. So
that's right. Yes. I'll use many filters to make myself look so good. You'll have no idea. Anyway, moving on from that, we got more detail about their investment, and he talked about bringing Jana Russell back as the manager of HR, and that's an example of preparing for growth, which I agree with. One interesting thing here is the question: what does alpha build look like? And Chris did talk a little bit about how that terms become subjective in the industry. Pre-alpha, alpha, beta is very subjective these days. But we are using the term in a very traditional sense. So alpha means major, feature complete version, usable, but not complete or polished, right? Not in a complete or polished form. So feature complete is not the same as complete, right? And you have to understand the difference there. And he said, when we have that, we go into alpha. So that's very clear. That's a very tangible thing to say. So I really like that. He also clarified some of the misconceptions about the refactoring. And we've seen this in some of the comments, I think, in some of the rewinds that we've done and other videos. That refactoring stuff keeps coming up saying they've started over. And, he just reiterated, every MMO goes through this. This is not an abnormal process, right? Every MMO is built with a certain amount of hard code, and then it gets refactored and changed. And it's been in their mind since day one. They knew this was coming, and they knew that it's a totally normal thing in this process of development. It's not starting over. It's not a waste of time, right? It's how things are done. So I think that needed to be said. It needed to be said again and again, maybe a few times. Who knows?
And he said, it was the best thing they ever did.
Yeah.
To be honest, like it's the best thing they could have ever done for Pantheon was to make that decision and to start that process. So
yeah. Another interesting question. It's been relevant because we've been talking about it lately. But somebody asked if there was a premium server with no cash shop in the game plan here. And Chris said it's really too early to speculate on elements of their business model. He actually sort of like, I don't know what the mindset was, but he said some of the team have speculated on this. And I feel like he kind of like regretted that a little bit, because it does come back to bite you. He did say the phrase, it won't be pay to win, but maintaining long-term health of the game is their core directive. He said they're not going to implement business models that hurt the long-term health of Pantheon. So, we could talk about that for a little while. I don't want to do it right now because I think you can interpret that a few different ways, but we'll just leave it at that for now. Because the last one, and I'm also really excited for this last point. This is my favorite part.
Of course it is.
Yeah, you know what I'm going to say here.
Yeah.
So he talked about what he's excited about in terms of beans. He wanted to spill. He said their epic abilities are planned, and he knows lots of them, and he's really excited for people to see it. And then he talked about some tab targeting and how they're sort of evolving that. And then he said he's very excited personally to see the way the Ranger is going to work. So he's got a real something going on with the Ranger that he really likes, and that's music to my ears. I cannot wait till they start showing the Ranger off. It is going to be epic. And he threw in gnomes as well. He really likes gnomes, but who cares about that? We care about the Rangers. Don't worry about the gnomes. I mean, unless you make gnomes Rangers, then I'm fine with it.
I have a theory.
Yeah, please share.
I think Rangers are going to be the top DPS. I don't think you're going to have the utility and the capabilities that I'm going to have as a rogue. So I don't think you'll be as useful as me, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to compete with you in DPS. I've really started to think that this is a thing that's going to happen. And keep in mind, we've never got to play Rangers, see the abilities, anything. I don't know. I've been really feeling this. It's like this internal thing, thinking that Wizards and Rangers are going to be the damage powerhouses, I feel like. I was just going to say, like, I feel like Drac probably just shed a little fireball tear because, he feels like Wizards should be the top DPS class in any MMO. And, who knows how it's going to work out, Drac, but it's weird. It's weird, man, because like I picked a rogue originally because if the world's going to be dangerous, I wanted to be able to stealth around in an adventure without being in fear, right? Like to be able to disappear and save myself. And it's funny because in my heart, I was picking a rogue for its utility. And then I was like, backstab and damage and blah, blah, blah. But like the more I've played what's out there right now and what we can experience as a rogue, which everyone's seen, I'm more into the utility than I am the damage. I just hope, I hope that like they don't try to balance the damage and then take some of the utility away. Like I'm kind of cool being this odd DPS utility class. Like I'm into it. Like I love it. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. No, just can't wait.
I'm still going to beat you on the meters, but.
Well, you will, only because I'm not trying. It's hard.
Yeah.
You'll make up an effort for your DPS what I do because I'm just don't care.
My hands will bleed on the keyboard to beat you.
Yeah, that's right. That's awesome. So anyway, that was Chris Rowan's interview on the Developer Roundtable. So you can go listen to that right now. It's they posted it on YouTube, so you can go check that out. Was there anything else on that, Minus, you wanted to add?
You covered everything well there. Loved it.
Cool. Okay, so let's introduce some new members of the community this week. We had an influx of new people, which is awesome. Fantastic to see. I think personally, just to relate it back, I think this is the impact of the evaluation build that they showed off. Some people saw what they liked what they saw, and they decided to join up. And Chris actually confirmed this a little bit as well. He did say that they've seen an influx. So that's good. So, and when I'm reading these off, listen up, because there's a few names that people shared of old characters that they're looking to see if they recognize people or if you recognize any of these people yourself. So anyway, first one was from Keywish, and they said, "Hello, everyone, longtime stalker. But my excitement is ratcheting up, so now I'm here. If you've spent time in Norath, you may know me as." So he listed his characters, and the first one is ZZIZ, and he was on the Nameless server decades ago.
Nameless. Nameless in that name. ZZIZ.
I know. I'm not even going to try
Every time you say Zed, I want to clarify for our American listeners that he means the letter Z. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. For you and the rest of the non-imperial English, Queen's English speaking world, I guess. Zed. I always think of Pulp Fiction when I hear Zed, to be honest with you, just because, Zed's dead, baby.
Oh, geez.
Anyway, he also played Twixt on the Alcabor server, Bolero on Agnar, and on P99, his name is Keywish. So if you recognize this person, then stop by the forum, say hi. Next one was Heath Arthur, and they said, "Hey, I've been following the game for years now. Finally decided it was time to get my pledge in on this crazy train. Spent most of my early 20s in Norath on Mithril Mar server. My main was Laith, I was a paladin. My secondary was Wraithcaller as a necro. Also spent time in EQ2. Name was Kraith, who was a berserker. And if by any chance you recognize those names, give me a shout. Also had a great friend on there that I lost track of years ago. named Aldiana, who was a wood elf druid. So if anyone knows that name, holler at me.
Cool.
Next up, yeah, very cool. Next up was Levelin, and they said, hail to all those who played EQ during the 1999-2001 era. Longtime lurker here with plans to upgrade after the Bard reveal, a class I hope to main, and a second class being a Paladin. So basically they talked about playing on the Vanguard emulator, getting a feel for it, and just being glad that that's still a thing. Like you can still play that world, and even though it's not, full form, but talking about how important it is to go back and remember what things could have been, right? And then looking at Pantheon and just, onward and upward. So I like that.
Awesome.
Yeah, next one was Revener. And they said, I'll try and put on my gnome shouting voice here because that's what they wrote. Anyway, they said, "Arr, fear the gnomish inquisition. Hello, all you tallies, gnome from Sweden here. Played EQ2 for years, 3 accounts, all gnomes and some Ratongas. Star Wars Galaxies, short bothans with pink fur, the way to go." They said they got a Pathfinder pledge. Now, he talks a little bit about going on a rant about how all classes can't be all races. He feels gnomes are discriminated against because they're not allowed to play. Yeah, not allowed to play many classes for no reason whatsoever. He thinks it's a dumb idea. How am I supposed to play a gnome healer or a tank? Why should I be forced to play a fat dwarf to heal and a halfling to tank? Everyone knows halflings are food. So I have a big fight of oppression ahead of me.
With a smiley face at the end, though.
Yeah. It's all in good fun. I think he actually did a post on the other forums too. So he's into it. The last one is my favorite. You'll hear why. This one is awesome. This is Dispersion. And they said, "I'm probably an uncommon pledge and I have no intention to play this game, but I still want to support it. I played D&D, almost always GM'd EQ on the Praxis server for a long time and some early WoW. Since then, more or less, I stopped gaming. So they're a physicist. He was actually a professor for a short period of time at a community college and now working in the industry as a scientist." Actually, he's probably offended by what I said earlier about science. He's like, what are these guys talking about? If you listen to the show.
Well, you did say that people do science. That was my favorite part of that. Then you're doing science.
I'm doing science.
Guys, we're doing science.
He's like, oh my, who are these bozos? Anyway, he goes on to say, "I love my job. I work a lot, super into rock climbing and surfing, which take up my weekends. I also have a lot of side projects. In short, I have no time or desire to game, but I love following the community, thinking of GameCraft, listening to podcasts on my commute, and want to support the game. Maybe I'll play Pantheon 2 when I retire." He says, "P.S. I sometimes go on very long, very easy, free solo rock climbs Sunday mornings, and I'll listen to Pantheon plus Rewind, usually on the descent since I start early. So don't make me laugh too much, Theric and Minus. You just might make me slip."
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm like all smiles right now. That's awesome. That's so cool.
I responded to him on the forums. I said, "Hey man, I can't promise anything and I can't have your life hanging in the balance based on what we're talking about on the Rewind. So, sorry, but you got to take care of that yourself." But anyway, those are some great intros this week. And
let's just hope he doesn't hear the part about doing science while he's climbing.
Oh my God, have we doomed this poor man to a fall from some rock face somewhere because my ridiculous choice of words of doing science? Oh gosh,
that's never
I got to live
away.
with that now. Yeah. I'll have that on my conscience for a while. But
all right, so everybody stop thinking about someone falling off of a mountain listening to this show, and let's get into a fun song. Here's the mail, it never fails. It makes me want to wag my tail. When it gets here, I just yell, mail! We're getting sued. All right, it's time for the mailbox. We got 3 questions today. Let's jump into those. So Galeth says the Druid class differs from that in many MMOs. Is it better to keep a generalist able to flex into different roles but not excel in any of them? Or is it better to sacrifice some versatility and utility so the class is typically known for to make it more focused and therefore more valuable in top-end raid setting? So he's basically saying like, okay, should classes be flexible to fit in different roles? Be a jack of all trades? It's kind of that old, when we were talking to Kevin, and he said like about, those classes that were called hybrids was kind of like a mistake, right? Because like if you're not good at anything, then it's not really worth playing. Like being average at everything is not as fun as being good at one thing. And I kind of side with that. And as far as like making it viable in top end rating, I think that when you have classes with identity that do specific things, they're going to be more valuable, in my opinion, because then other classes aren't going to do it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a question that made me realize how much I wish we had a druid in our Classes 101 video series, because they're so different in different games. They really have a wide sort of range of how they're portrayed. I think Galeth is right when it comes to that. One of the things about the druid that I do like that they don't fit into a box necessarily. I think about, archetypes, and it's easy to think of archetypes for other classes, but what famous druids are out there? When you're making a druid, who are you thinking about, right? It took me a while to kind of come up with that. And I thought of Malfurion from WoW just because I know it from Hearthstone. So maybe people are sort of modeling around Malfurion now, but I don't know if there's no Gandalf, right? There's no like really famous druid that I could come up with. I'm sure people listening to this would be like, oh yeah, think of this one. But I don't know. I think them being a generalist is okay. It doesn't preclude you from being valuable necessarily. I know what you're saying about what Kevin Jordanson, and that's true. There is that aspect to it, but I kind of like that they're wide open a little bit. I always think of druids as sort of like my more naturey brothers and sisters, right? As a ranger,
I very much put druids and rangers like in a box, like I do. I always have. Like
I had an epiphany before we started recording. I'm going to tell you now because it's a perfect moment for it. But like if you look at the classes, there's always like brothers and sister classes. You know what I mean? Like rangers and druids are brothers and sisters. Paladins and clerics are brothers and sisters. Wizards and warriors, they're kind of like, I feel like that.
Wizards and warriors.
Well, yeah, because they're like, I don't know, there's something about them very primary about them. The wizard and the warrior, you go back to D&D, early D&D, right? All right. And then I thought rogues. Well, like, no, who are rogues? I'm like, rogues have nobody. Rogues, you know what rogues are? They're like the only child that is like spoiled and gets everything they want.
Spoiled? Oh man, rogues are usually poor or getting by their thievery and trickery. I don't know.
They're all
about that. Spoiled's a ranger. Anything elven is spoiled. Get out of here.
Oh, I don't know, man. Well, when you find out what the matching class for the rogue is, you let me know. I don't know. They're kind of like only children in my mind.
We're unique.
Special snowflakes.
Yeah, I don't know about snowflakes. Special indeed. So DB440. I'll send in his rate. He said, how much should VR listen to the community when it comes to making decisions about development? You kind of touched on this with the roundtable, like they want to listen, but there's danger in it, and they want to share, and there's danger in it. I mean, I have commented on this how many times? How many rewinds in Pantheon Plus Use do we have? I've commented probably at least half of them. Listen, it sounds silly coming from me because me and you stand up here and we talk about what we want to see, and we try to reflect on some of the great community ideas, and we talk in Discord till we're blue in the face, and we venture into Reddit and forums and Twitter. So we obviously we have a voice, right? Like we can't be stupid and say we don't. We've been doing this for 2 years. There's still people who check us out. VR is nice enough to us to listen at times. So we have a voice, and it's funny because I'm the first person that says, I think too much of any voice to developers is a bad thing. I really do. I constantly go back to the same example, and I'm sorry for using the same one, but how many people told them how to make Zelda? Nobody. Art is art. And I think at some point, video games kind of got away from people seeing it as art. These are visions of worlds. It's no different than writing a book or writing, George R.R. Martin putting together the world for, Game of Thrones, for Harry Potter and that world being built, for a movie like The Matrix and that whole universe. Like there's this artistic idea that is developed from these creative minds who envision this world. And the more outsiders that break into that and try to rationalize it into their own thoughts or their own experiences dilute that idea heavily from being something unique and different that you've never experienced. And I think in gaming, it's the same thing. Like, again, I'm sitting here with a voice. I want transmog, right? Like today we've talked about things we want, and we're going to constantly do it still. I'm not saying there's a harm in the community doing it, but there is a harm when a developer listens too much. Yes, community does matter, but we matter to each other as well. Community matters when there's a decision that they're not sure on and they want our feedback and our advice. That's important. But I think at the end of the day, a developer and an artist has to have their canvas, and it has to be what's in their mind, because when that artist stops enjoying their vision, we all suffer very much so. that artist has to stay, devoted to this idea, this spark that motivated them to put all these hours in. And the more that the community chips away at that idea, again, we just end up with a team that's not as motivated, not as passionate, because it's not the dream they had. We want their dream to be as close to that vision as possible. I really do believe that. And along the way where we can help or we can push a little bit for some cool things, let's do it. That's cool. But that's the extent that I think a community should have when it comes to development decisions, in my opinion.
That is beautiful. I could not say it better myself. What you just said, you should frame that, put that up somewhere, or write that down, because that was a thing of beauty, man. And you just nailed it, 100% nailed it. I'm not even going to try. So well said, dude.
Well, there you go. It only takes 42 episodes, and I get one right.
Right. No.
Final question in the mailbox here. Ogre 2. What are your thoughts on world buffs? Are they good and fun, or are they something that they should be avoided? And I kind of asked him, like, okay, clarify. I thought I knew what he was talking about. Just clarify so I don't go off on a tangent. So he lists an example for Anexia. When it would die in WoW, you got her head. And then you would go to Stormwind and you would turn the head in, right? And what they'd do is they'd hang the head up on this big display and everybody would get a big buff. And basically then people that were in high-end guilds would use this buff or plan these world events to happen at the same time so they could be buffed up a little to go, attack these raids that were still difficult or new. So what are your thoughts on something like that?
I kind of like it, but I kind of like it to be out of the player's control. I don't want it to be something that can be triggered by other players, because it'll get abused and to a certain extent. I don't know how much they could abuse it if it was a super difficult thing to do, but I'd rather it be something like, okay, we know in Pantheon, we know in the world of Terminus, once a week on Wednesday nights, it's druids have a little bit extra, casters have a little extra oomph in their spells, and maybe Fridays are, you can give it a world reason, give it something like that.
The cycle of the moons.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Good point. Yeah, that's right. Cycle of the moons and something like that. I'd rather be out of the player's control. So I don't mind it. Just don't want it to be abused or gamified, I guess.
Yeah. No, I kind of agree. It was, I don't know. I don't think that the Anexia buff was ever that big of a deal.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Like small.
Yeah, but I get it. People will use any advantage they can to try to get ahead. And I don't think that you necessarily designed for that small percentage. I think there's probably more people who had a lot of fun with it and just got a little bit extra buffs as they ran around the world with their groups and stuff like that. And I think that there's not really a lot of harm in that. I kind of like it. I think it's fun. It's something different. You go to town and there's fireworks going off. There's a big dragon head hanging there. You're like, oh, cool,
Yeah.
Announcements and stuff. It kind of just makes the world feel alive. I kind of like it.
For sure. I can get behind that.
All right, well, that's it for the mailbox. On to you.
Sit back and relax. It's time for The Lore You Know. And now, a continued reading from the Book of Availloth, Primer on the Human Pantheon of Deities. Osari, he who rages. After descending to join the cohort of the Ravaging Lord, along with Hathith Krebjil of the Archai, Osari enjoyed great success against his former race. Mercifully, he suffered a mortal's fate at the hands of the sons of Terminus on the Silent Plains. As with all of the Five of Contempt, there is illegality associated with the worship of Osari. Temples and shrines to Osari are by law destroyed immediately upon discovery, with prison terms levied among the participants. Tokens and depictions of Osari are similarly outlawed, but some vengeful mortals keep these items buried beneath their cloaks, and bodily markings similarly covered. In those depictions, the head of the defrocked god is often missing, though he still holds his twin axes, Thrash and Profane. Despite this persecution, his name is still invoked, most often by those seeking vengeance, or used as a curse by those who have been empowered by great anger. And that's the lore you know.
Well, that wraps up another great episode of The Rewind. Great, I say, because it's fun enjoying it with you. And hopefully everybody listening also thinks it was great. Otherwise, we may get canceled. Just kidding. Theric, awesome job today. Thank you very much to everybody out there who hung out with the live chat. I wish I could be there more with you guys, but enjoy Theric's wonderful presence there in the chat. And to thank you again, we will continue to highlight those who do support us, and with those donations and those small little bits that really mean an absolute ton to us. So Theric, thank you for always, sharing the names of those people who go the extra mile to help us succeed. And that's really what you're doing. So we really do appreciate that. And I just want you to know, again, as Theric said many times, we put this back into this product. We're never going to be living off of this. So we look at this as a net sum of zero. If we can get to zero, we're doing a great job putting it back in and stuff like that, right? So thank you to everybody who listens every week. Thank you to those climbing mountains and listening to us on the way down. Hold on tight, please. Please hold on tight. Oh my gosh. Yes,
please do.
I hope you're okay. If you get injured, but you're still okay, send a picture, but put nobody does science on a piece of paper, or something like that. But if you're okay, if you're not okay, no jokes, but when you get better, we'll have the jokes again. So everybody, thank you so much. Theric, thank you for another great episode. Don't forget, you guys can download this. If you don't want to listen to it on demand, just, subscribe to us on any podcast, really anything. So thank you all again. We'll see you next week for the rewind, and enjoy one more day closer to Pantheon.
See you next week, everyone.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Be sure to follow Minus and all Pantheon Plus related content on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube under the name Pantheon Plus. Also, be sure to follow Theric at Pantheon Theric on Twitter. Keep up to date on all Pantheon Rise of the Fallen information on www.pantheon.plus, the definitive source for all media of Pantheon. Until next time.